Hello, everybody. Welcome to Rake the Take, a golf betting podcast hosted by me, Chris Lewis. And in this week's episode, we're going to be going over the Cognizant Classic, which takes place at the Champion course at PGA National. It's a 7,000-yard par 71. They used to play it as a par 70, but they made the switch to a par 71 last year, I imagine, just to kind of make the event a little bit more accessible for players to come and play at, because it's always been known as a very difficult course, and it's just in a weird part of the schedule for a lot of players, so they don't really want to have to play a lot of events going into the Players during the Florida Swing, which this is the first part of the Florida Swing, of course, after the Mexico Open. But yeah, no, I will say after that, though, that there's not really like one major skill set that you really need at this course. In general, I do think that you need to be able to have some proficiency on approach, and have an ability to be able to attack the par fives. The greens are somewhat small, and they have some defenses that if you miss, you'll may need to be able to get up and down. So having a solid around the green game wouldn't hurt at all either. You really need to be accurate off the tee, but you don't have to necessarily be a long hitter to be able to do well here. There are some places where if you do miss the fairway, you can have some ease getting up and down, because the rough isn't typically super penal at this course. It's really mainly the waste areas and the hazards that really can cause the most danger at this course. But overall, there are some places where you really need to be able to have some distance to really be able to take advantage of some of the shorter par fours or par fives. But yeah, it's not a terribly long course overall, so I don't think you need to be a distance hitter, but that is, just one edge that you could have if you are playing this event. But yeah, in general, you kind of do need a good tee to green game. Putting is not necessarily the most predictive of skill sets here, but I'm not really punishing too much, like good putters, too much at this event. But it's not necessarily the most predictive of skill sets for success. But yeah, that's pretty much kind of the summary of the course and how it plays and what you should expect this week. It will be a difficult test. I'm expecting a final score somewhere between 7 under to 10 under par. But yeah, let's get into the picks. To lead off the betting card, I like Taylor Pendrith this week. And Pendrith, he's been in really good form over the past year, consistently finishing in the top 20 on the PGA Tour after he's really kind of come into his own, and after a win at the CJ Cup, Byron Nelson tournament. I really like Pendrith's game overall. I've always really been a big fan of his. Always thought he was very underrated, so I'm glad to see that he's kind of ascended atop the betting boards as of late. He's a great driver of the golf ball, one of the longer hitters on the PGA Tour, but also very good on approach. That's a part of his game that he's really developed over the past year. Around the greens and with the putter, I'd say that's his main weakness now. But overall, I'd say that he is a good putter. But he just hasn't really been as consistent so far to begin 2025 with the putter. The putter was one of his main weapons last season, and I think that's something that, it's kind of a good buy low opportunity on him, given how well he's been gaining strokes off the tee and on approach throughout the other events this season, as evidenced by his top 10 at the Farmers and at the AT&T Pebble Beach Pro-Am. He was definitely a very popular pick going into the Genesis Invitational, but didn't really come through there. But just tee to green, he's been very consistent on a strokes gain perspective, and I really do think that he is close to kind of being in contention or snagging another tournament win. He's just a very capable player, and I think one of the better players on the PGA Tour now. that he's kind of established his success in 2024. So I do really like Pendriff this week. You kind of get him around 30 to 1 or 35 to 1. I would shop a little bit, try to get the best number, but I really like him this week. He should be a good play. I also really like Davis Thompson. Obviously, he's no stranger to us at this point. If you've been listening to this podcast, we didn't take him at the Genesis Invitational, which he played really well that week, ironically, but it is what it is. That's golf. But hey, I'm not taking Denny McCarthy this week, so he probably will win if you're listening to this. But yeah, Davis Thompson, he's great around the greens. He's a very good ball striker overall. I think the main weakness for him this season has really been on approach and with the putter, but the approach play looked a lot better at the Genesis. So I think that's starting to turn it around a little bit. And if he can really be in the form that he was towards the end of 2024, I think Davis Thompson could be in for another win this season, and it could be here at the Cognizant Classic. I almost said the Honda. It should still be the Honda, by the way. I'm in agreement with a lot of people about this take. It should still be the Honda. I'm not a big fan of the Cognizant label. Just putting it out there, man. The Honda was classic. Not to be, no pun intended, of course. But yeah, Davis Thompson should be a good play this week. You can get him at 40 to 1. I like those odds. It's not too much of a I guess a decrease for him given how he's been playing. But yeah, no, I like Davis Thompson. Should be a solid play. After that, I got Doug Gim. The thing about Doug Gim is that he's just a very good ball striker. He's on the 93rd percentile on approach now, one of the better approach players on the PGA Tour. Extremely accurate off the tee, in the 90th percentile. And honestly, you wouldn't really think of him as a long hitter. That was something that, he's kind of struggled with. But lately, he's actually picked up a lot of distance. And so he's now becoming a little bit more of an average distance player on the PGA Tour, which, given his accuracy, could be a pretty big weapon on some of these courses. And the big weakness for Doug Gim right now has been around the greens and with the putter. The around the green game overall, I'd say, is very average. He's maybe a little poor chipping from the fairway and not as good from the rough, but he's been a pretty okay bunker player. All those statistics ranging from the 40th to the 50th percentile. But the putting has been woeful. He is in the 5th percentile for putting, which is abysmal. Especially from 5 to 30 feet is where he really has struggled. But with many no putt guys, if they can just gain strokes putting in one event, it's usually going to look pretty good for them. And this is an event last season where Doug Gim actually did gain strokes putting. He had a great week tee to green. Solid approach play, solid off the tee. He did lose some strokes around the greens, but I like to see that, I think Gim is a player that does like to play well at courses where he has played well previously. So I think this is a good point to kind of buy low on Doug. He hasn't been hitting it poorly so far in 2025. The approach play has been excellent. The results really just haven't been there. But if the putter really gets going, I do think Doug Gim could maybe sneak up on this event. I do like him a lot as a player. And Grant, if you're listening, it is a Doug Gim week, baby. But yeah, after that, I also got Brian Campbell. Whoa. Oh, I should say, Doug Gim is, by the way, is 110 to 1. Great price. But yeah, I got Brian Campbell. Whoa. Big time winner last week at the Mexico Open. Won at 30 to 1. Sorry if you hear that vibrating. That's my phone. I got to try to put it on silent. But yeah, Brian Campbell. Big time winner at 300 to 1 last week at the Mexico Open. It was crazy seeing him to see what he did, but I'm kind of surprised to see him at 100 to 1 this week. Even though he is a relatively unknown guy, if you kind of look deeper into his history and his recent history, he's been very consistent. posting many results within the top 20 and the top 10 and the top 5 throughout the Corn Ferry season in 2024. And if you look at his 2025 season so far, I think a lot of people were pointing out this at Twitter. I was like, oh, wow, like he WD'd, finished tied for 51st and missed the cut, and then he won. But it's like if you look deeper into his results from 2025, it's really not all that bad. At the WD at the Sony Open, it was after an opening round 67, which is crazy. You rarely see that on the PGA Tour. Who knows what happened there? But that did give me some faith that he's like, okay, maybe, he is a lot better than we were giving him credit for before this win at the Mexico Open. I'm not saying that, if I had really dug deep, I would have taken him in Mexico last week. But, still, it's like there's some lot of encouraging signs here. And if you look even deeper, you look at the American Express, shot a 70, 69, 67, 71 to finish tied for 51st. That's not really a great course fit for him because you really need a lot of distance to dominate those courses. But after that, you go to the Farmers and he gets kind of on the bad side of the draw. He shoots a 75 at the South course on the first day, which was playing about 3 over par on average, and then he plays the North course on the next day, where he shoots a 74, which was actually a gaining strokes round, but the North course was playing so hard, playing harder than the South course because of the winds. So many people who had that south to north or in that south to north wave missed the cut that week because of those conditions. They were playing on courses that average around like 6 over par, whereas if you played the north and the south, if you were in the north south wave, you played the North course basically 5 strokes easier. So most of those guys made the cut anyway. So I'm really not going to ding him too much for those bad rounds. Even the 74 is a good round considering how hard the North course was playing. So I really do feel like that. He's played pretty solid golf all throughout the year, excluding the Mexico Open. He's definitely not like a scrub at all. So I feel like this is a good opportunity to just kind of take him and see if he goes on a hot run. Maybe he wins back to back. It wouldn't be the craziest thing in the world to see that happen. We see it, basically every few years that somebody wins back to back, and it usually is somebody that you don't expect, like a Brendan Todd in 2020. So yeah, I really do like Brian Campbell this week, and I think this is a good course fit for him, especially because he's been very accurate with his off the tee play. He's been a good approach player, and his short game is phenomenal. Really, the only negative downside for him so far this year has been off the tee in terms of the driving distance, and it's like people may point to the par 5 incident in the playoff where he almost hit it out of bounds. But I think that's more of a under pressure situation than anything. And he got out of that and won. So it's like, I'm not going to punish him for one shot that he got out of and won the tournament just because it was lucky and that pot guy probably should have won. But really, if we're being honest with you, Aaron Rai should have won that tournament. Let's be real here. He missed so many putts down the stretch. So who cares? Brian Campbell, I think he's a good bet. I got him at 100 to 1. Screw it. I think it makes a lot of sense to me. But yeah, after that, I like Max McGreevy. I'm taking him again this week. I have him at 175 to 1. I really like how he played at the Mexico Open. Even though he did shoot 3 over on the first day, he still managed to get out of that and finish tied for 25th overall. So, if he just had a solid day to begin the first round, man, he could have really had a great week. So it sucks that he had a slow start and he couldn't really get our top 20 or our top 10 or top 5. But yeah, no, I do think if you look at Max McGreevy's record, especially in 2024, he won a lot, contended a lot. He was very consistent, kind of like Brian Campbell, except without the Brian Campbell didn't have the wins. Max McGreevy did. So it's like, I think at 175 to 1, there's really not that much of a difference between him and some of these other guys that are kind of closer to the 100-to-1 range, like a Brian Campbell. And I think with McGreevy, he picked up he looked like he picked up a lot of distance at Mexico. He's very accurate off the tee. The approach play, I think, is probably the biggest concern with him. But around the greens and with the putter, he was very solid. So yeah, I just think it's like with Max McGreevy, we just have to keep waiting and see where his game is going. Obviously, he had a very successful 2024, and I think this is just a good point to kind of keep riding him and keep him going, because he ended the week in Mexico very well. So let's just see what happens. I really don't think that McGreevy is a bad pick this week at all. I love how he played in Mexico. Let's just keep riding. But yeah, and to conclude my card, I already said McGreevy 175 to 1. Boom. Jackson Suber, he's my next pick. I have him at 225 to 1. And the thing about Suber is that he's been gaining strokes on approach in every event so far this year in the PGA Tour. Around the greens, he's been very solid as well. Off the tee, I think he does have some decent power. And if you may not remember this, but he kind of was flirting around the U.S. Open top 20 for the first couple days before really falling off in 2024 on the weekend. But, I mean, just like these other guys that I'm talking about, he was very consistent on the Korn Ferry Tour. And I just think that these are guys that we have to take. Campbell, I think, displayed that last week, that in a lot of these models and a lot of these projections is that there's just big holes because people aren't willing to take the leaps on these guys yet on the Korn Ferry Tour. But now that we're starting to kind of get a few events in, it could be time to just kind of take some chances and see what we get. A guy like McGreevy, he's a little bit different because he did play a full season on the PGA Tour in 2023, so we do have a lot of data on him. But not a lot of good data, I will say. But outside of that, though, I mean, guys like Suber, guys like Campbell, we're still really kind of learning about them. But yeah, no, I think Suber's a good pick this week. He seems like a very good ball striker, especially on approach. Some respectable distance. The short game, could be a little hit or miss, but I'm not ready to call him a bad short game player right now. But we'll see. Let's just see what happens. He's from South Florida. He could be really familiar with the conditions here. So I kind of like the long shot play, especially at 225 to 1. But yeah, that's the card this week. Pendrith, Thompson, Gim, Campbell, McGreevy, Suber. Let's roll, baby. Thanks so much for listening, and good luck if you tail.